behind me represents some of the biggest problems in American transportation planning.
Huh?
That's right, Atlanta's 5 Points Station is the subject of some of the biggest controversies to face the region in a long time.
When news broke last minute that the city would close the station to street access for 4 years, riders protested as MARTA scrambled to deny, backtrack, and eventually put the project on hold entirely.
Suddenly told MARTA to halt construction, planned to start in early July of the 5 Points Station.
The project lacked public engagement from the organizations that are using it.
Why? Because there are questions of financial mismanagement, a possibility that MARTA owes the city an additional $10 million.
As you can see, 5 Points Station is very much still open and still operating. But we didn't get here without a lot of vocal opposition. To me, this project is a prime example of some of the biggest problems in our society today. We are in the middle of a war on public transportation. To start here on this dreary-ass day, let's get down to basics.
5 Points is the main crossroads of the MARTA system, the largest and most expansive heavy rail system in the southeast. The station is the converging point for all 4 lines in the system and handles all rail transfers and over 10 bus transfers in a single station. And for a station built in the 1980s, it's starting to show its age. Broken escalators, garbage, closed storefronts, and the impending doom of the brutalist canopy collapsing. That's where today comes in. 5 Points Renovation is a project that was pitched, planned, and funded as a transformation for downtown Atlanta, set to start construction right now.
MARTA wants to renovate 5 Points Station for 2 primary reasons. First, the obvious goal: facelift the aging station for visitors, especially since we are hosting several World Cup games here in 2026.
Now let's be clear. Cleaning up and facelifting 5 Points Station doesn't hurt. The station is showing its age, and honestly feels hostile most of the time. There's nowhere to sit, there's no greenery, and overall doesn't feel like you want to be there very long. But it's functional. It works very well at transferring people between trains, and many bus routes also converge here.
Second, the massive brutalist canopy that covers the station is aging and needs to be replaced, mainly due to water damage.
For this reason, MARTA also has a major financial incentive. The project is getting a fair bit of state and federal funding, making it pencil out better on the local funding sources. 5 Points Renovation is one of the major projects listed on the More MARTA bill from 2016, the bill that promises multiple expansion projects brought by an increased sales tax of a half penny.
To get to the bottom of this, I decided to finally interview for the channel. I reached out to Carden Wyckoff, transportation and disability advocate, who recently spoke at the 5 Points rally.
For starters, my name is Carden, and I'm a disability advocate. I have a lived experience where I have a progressive disability. It's transformed into me using a wheelchair full-time that started in my 20s.
We're at 5 Points. What is the 5 Points Transformation Project, and what benefits do you think it would bring the city, and what are your general thoughts on it?
The 5 Points Transformation Project to me really means like revitalizing the heart of the city with transit being at the center. And that includes redesigning the train station, 5 Points, redesigning, creating a livability aspect, and increasing retail and increasing economic impact within the heart of the city. You know, for me, like, I really do believe we should transform downtown. We should create a better transit hub that serves all these people so that we can create a culture of not having that car dependency, but at the cost of what?
So there are 3 main issues with the 5 Points Renovation Project as a whole. The first being the station design itself.
One major critique made is that the station's redesign is not significant enough to warrant the investment. The station will remain a plaza, and according to Thread ATL, the station continues to cut off both sides of Broad Street. Once the renovation is complete, the overall function of the station will remain unchanged, as the redesign should include real estate development on top of the property and reconnect Broad Street entirely in order to create housing, destinations, and increase the density of downtown.
The second being the street closures and bus reroutes.
5 Points Station is the heart of pedestrian traffic and transportation for this area, and closing it would put the area around the station at an even worse position than it already is. For a $230 million project, closing the station will do much more damage than a facelifted station could ever recover from. This is especially concerning considering the recent investment in South Downtown's historic buildings, with new shops and restaurants such as Spiller Park and Tide Tate Kitchen along Hotel Row, 2 blocks from 5 Points Station. And the Gulch has several towers going up right now, as part of the new entertainment district that will fill in the massive parking crater between the Ben Stadium and 5 Points Station. Do we expect people to drive to these locations?
And lastly, the absolutely insane accessibility accommodations.
Most importantly, the accessibility solution for the foyer closure is just completely unacceptable. Due to station design, the renovation plans would block elevator access in the station in certain directions. This means that riders who require elevators would be unable to use the 5-point station for the entire foyer closure. So MARTA has proposed a bus shuttle that would operate between Georgia State Station and Peachtree Center Station. This could easily add 30 minutes to an hour of travel times across the board for riders that need elevators.
How many more elevators would you have to go up and down?
A lot more elevators. The proposed solution was, for me, if I'm so I live in Midtown, so I would be traveling south. I would get off at Peachtree Center and I would board a bus shuttle. And then the bus shuttle would take me from Peachtree Center to Georgia State on roads that don't have any dedicated lane or prioritization signaling. It would be potentially 2 additional elevators at every station, add 5 minutes on waiting on every elevator, and then boarding a bus shuttle, getting strapped down, tied down with my wheelchair so I'm not sliding around. I mean, it could potentially add an additional 30 minutes to an hour.
So since the criticism, MARTA has actually put the project on hold indefinitely. While this may sound like good news, it also is just kind of disappointing. I'd rather see some work done on public transport here rather than none at all.
The good news is, there's actually 2 projects going on here. The Transformation Project, which is the project above the station, is on hold indefinitely. However, there's also the Revitalization Project going on underneath the station. This project is updating the entire interior of the station with new lighting, walls, seating, and more. It is continuing as planned as it does not require station shutdown. However, it is still unknown what will come of the Transformation Project.
The mayor has publicly mentioned a 10-year plan, but as the story is still developing, I don't want to provide any non-concrete information. So let's be real, MARTA really fell short when it came to public engagement.
There's a priority issue here for MARTA. The biggest thing riders ask for is for MARTA to improve service, which means more transit lines and better frequencies. This is stuff that makes the transit system actually useful for regular riders, and prevents riders from having to choose to take rideshare or drive a car. Instead, the City of Atlanta and MARTA Transit prefer to invest in mostly an aesthetic project, just to appeal to the perception of 2 weeks of soccer fans visiting in 2026, instead of real residents of the city. And the project won't even be finished at all by the games. It's the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, all over again.
And did MARTA really ever engage the public on this project? Not really. The news of station closures, bus reroutes, and accessibility shuttles was broken a month before the project was supposed to start.
We didn't know how long it was going to take until the elevators would be open. We couldn't get definitive answers. We heard 18 months. We heard 4 years. 4 years without having an elevator. I mean, I come to the station multiple times a week and I transfer as well. And not having pedestrian access as well is significant. It's a big detriment to people's livelihood, not only just the businesses around here and the foot traffic that they get.
And the cherry on top? Recently, it came out that 6 out of 16 of MARTA's board members don't even ride MARTA frequently. Those 6 haven't ridden MARTA more than 6 times in the past year.
Why are people who live suburban lifestyles, driving cars for most trips, making the decisions to guide our public transportation system? These people do not represent the best wishes of actual riders, so it makes sense that the board would care more about perception, cleaning up the main downtown station and making it more attractive to visitors and suburbanites.
And to make matters worse, as of August 2024, an independent audit came out criticizing MARTA of misappropriating more MARTA funds to the tune of $70 million of taxpayer funds.
More MARTA is the bill passed in 2016 that raised the sales tax by a half penny in the City of Atlanta for capital expansion projects. This tax would fund expansion projects laid out by the agency, such as Beltline Rail, Clifton Corridor, and Summerhill BRT, alongside other improvement projects including 5 Points Renovation. However, since 2016, MARTA has severely cut back on many of the promised more MARTA projects in the pipeline. We haven't really seen major progress, and the scrutiny on 5 Points Renovation, ridership records reports, and spending audits have not helped at all either. Now, to be fair, MARTA has been historically limited since its inception. For starters, the state of Georgia has systemically limited MARTA's funding, as the agency is the only large public transportation service in the entire country not to be supported by state funding. Secondly, Cobb and Gwinnett County's historical decisions to not join MARTA have had severe consequences on MARTA's effectiveness, as the northern suburbs are by far some of the wealthiest and most populated areas of the region. And lastly, all of this leads to MARTA often spending more on operations and maintenance instead of capital expansion. The agency heavily relies on federal grants for expansion projects, as nearly 70% of revenue comes from sales tax, TAVT tax, and fares from member municipalities, especially since ridership was decimated during COVID.
So yes, MARTA is a PR nightmare at the moment. It does have me worried about the future of public transport.
This isn't really an excuse for the agency, but it is interesting how MARTA is systematically limited in many ways from expansion. Look at Georgia DOT's recent announcement: 6 more toll lanes for I-285, operated by a private company for profit for 50 years. And no one is batting an eye at this. I do think the anger at MARTA is justified. However, we really should be holding our leaders more accountable here. Public transportation comes under so much more scrutiny than any other form of transportation, despite being the most efficient and most proven mode of transport across the world.
Without proper expansion of public transportation services, we just cannot handle all this dense growth in a sustainable manner. Everything here with 5 Point Station is completely emblematic of the greater perception and priorities of our leaders, and every city has a project that turned out just like 5 Point's renovation.
Look at New York City, for example. Congestion pricing was supposed to be a major funding source for the MTA, to fund expansion projects while also making it nicer for both drivers and non-drivers in the congestion pricing region of Manhattan, by reducing traffic with a toll that requires road users to pay fairly for the public infrastructure. However, Governor Hochul of New York State decided privately to cut the project without making proper public engagement after a decade in the making, despite also engaging in dissonance that the city needed to reduce traffic congestion in the city core. Congestion pricing was the primary funding source for most of the MTA's future projects, including adding accessible elevators to existing subway stations, and this move single-handedly hurts the MTA's efforts to improve coverage and accessibility.
So the root problem: public transportation has a perception problem, and I don't think we're going to get past this without significant effort in education.
With more than half of the American population living outside of population centers and suburban and rural communities, it's easy to see why many Americans don't see a need for public transportation. When all you know, often for multiple generations, is how to get around with a car, it's going to be really hard to break that generational expectation. That's a difficult problem to face. How do we encourage sustainable transit-rich development and convince people to use this development? It's a difficult task, and the major reason transportation agencies face so much difficulty in the modern day. It's pretty much impossible to expect a budget-strapped transit system to cover large swaths of suburban sprawl that is systematically designed to be traversed by the car. Not to mention the negative stereotype people have for public transportation. Overall, a century of automobile and gasoline lobbying, alongside long-standing classism and racial stereotyping of transit riders, has been fighting a war on public transportation that is difficult to fight to this day.
It's difficult to really understand why they're not supportive of these projects. They haven't really understood what it is like to not have that ability to drive a car. And so they're used to that. They think maybe it creates crime, because it adds more unsheltered people, loud and obnoxious. I don't know, there could be a million reasons why someone doesn't want it. But I think to create cities that are livable, that are thriving, transit has to be a center of that.
So what do we do here? So actually, what happened in Atlanta is an extremely awesome example of what we can do. The outcry by the local advocacy organizations and local politicians through the rally, community outreach, and online messaging had an immense impact on the outcome of this project.
The advocacy organizations, there was like 15 advocacy organizations and local businesses and NPUs that were really pushing back on MARTA, and they were very supportive.
On the bright side, in a lot of ways, we are actually in a renaissance in public transportation investment. We are seeing so much support on a federal level for rail infrastructure and public transportation investment. I just hope what we see trickles down to the state level, especially in Georgia. Overall, I want to be clear, while this project is not perfect, the idea of renovating 5 Points can be a good idea, but it needs to be done with more care and really prioritize its riders.
Yes, if you look at 5 Points, it's sad. It needs love. It needs some TLC. It does need an upgrade to it. But we want to make sure that we're also spending millions of dollars that will really transform the city. And the advocacy organizations really didn't feel that either that messaging was delivered or that even the plans were delivered.
And then maybe we can get the project done right. We just want to get around our city using effective, equitable, and accessible transportation. Thanks for watching, y'all. I'll see y'all next time.